The Judge, Part 2, a short story of inspiration by author Paula Woods. Read to you by Elva Nelson Hayes. In the meantime, Kenny achieves notoriety as a small-time hustler and a pimp. He spends most of his time evading the police and monitoring his whores. He has money, jewelry, and a nice car, expensive clothes, and a luxurious penthouse apartment where he lives with his main woman. He has hood cred. He's respected and revered by other hustlers and pimps. Even young boys want to be like him. Ironically, Kenny's one redeeming quality is his close relationship with his mother. Almost 12 years after the meeting between Kenny and Mr. J, their paths cross in an unexpected manner. Kenny is arrested for selling drugs and pimping, with the drug charges being the most serious of the two because he was caught with 7½ ounces of cocaine. Since the police had been trying to get some evidence on Kenny for the past 12 years, they asked the DA to seek a no bail hold, and one high enough to keep him in jail. The DA asked and received from the court a $1 million bail. Kenny knows he's in trouble and he cannot raise that kind of money. He calls his mother and explains the situation to her and asks for her help. He wants her to see if she can find him a good lawyer to get his bail reduced. He asks her to meet him in court the day after tomorrow. His mother, Arlene Williams, tells Kenny that a friend of hers knows this black lawyer who's supposed to be very good. She'll ask her to arrange a meeting for her to talk to him about you. His mother says, "Now, son, I want you to keep your mouth closed. Don't talk to anyone. You hear me?" "Yeah, Mom, I hear you." "Son, this ain't anything to play around with. If you're not careful, you could end up in prison for 10 to 15 years or maybe 20 years. Who knows?" "I know. I've got it covered here." "Okay, I'll see you in court." Kenny's mother calls Joseph Bell, the famous black criminal attorney, to seek his help. She arranges a meeting to see him the same day. "Good to see you, Miss Williams," Mr. Bell says. "Please have a seat." "Thank you. Now, what can I assist you with?" "Mr. Bell," Kenny's mother sighs, "my son got arrested for selling some drugs. They set his bail at $1 million. That's not right. That's a high bail for selling and possessing some drugs." "How much drugs are they alleging he had in his possession?" "Kenny told me they were charging him with possessing 7½ ounces of cocaine." "That does sound excessive," Mr. Bell says. "Typically, the court doesn't set a bail that high unless there are some underlying factors. I'm willing to do what I can to see if we can get his bail reduced. After that, I would need to talk to Kenny before I can agree to take the case. Fair enough?" "Yes, sir. How much are you going to charge me for this?" "For now, you can give me a down payment of $1,000. After I delve into a case a little more, I'll tell you what the overall charges will be." "That's fine. Thank you, sir." "You're welcome, and thank you for coming." Arlene and Mr. Bell arrive in court for the bail reduction hearing being presided over by Judge Yee. Unbeknownst at the time to Arlene and Mr. Bell, Judge Yee had interacted with Kenny at the Continental Country Club. Kenny bought a $25,000 membership at that club. He thought this would make him important. Judge Yee doesn't see Kenny initially because he's reviewing his case file. He raises his head as the bailiff calls Kenny Williams' name and case number. He seems somewhat startled to see Kenny wearing a bright orange prison jumpsuit standing in front of him with his attorney. "Your Honor," Mr. Bell says in a calm and powerful voice, "I represent Mr. Williams." "Very good, Mr. Bell," Judge Yee says. "Now, who's here from the district attorney's office?" "Deputy DA Andrew Stevens. I represent the people, Your Honor," Stevens says. "Okay, Mr. Bell," Judge Yee says. "What do you have to say about your current bail?" Mr. Bell explained his position to the court, that in most cases the bail is set much lower for the amount of cocaine allegedly belonging to Mr. Williams. He requested that the bail be reduced to the prevailing bail rates for similar cases. DA Stevens disagreed vehemently and asked the judge to keep the bail at $1 million. The judge agreed with the district attorney and kept the bail at $1 million. Mr. Bell looked disappointed. Nevertheless, he asked Arlene to go home and pray for her son. He was going to file a motion for a new bail reduction hearing. Arlene waves to Kenny and tells him to be strong. She rushed home and called her friend Gwen to tell her what happened and seek her advice. After explaining to Gwen what happened in court, Gwen shouts, "Girl, they're trying to railroad your son. The system is going to send him down the river for 20 years if you don't watch out. There's some crooks down there at that courthouse." "Yeah, I know," Arlene says, smiling for the first time since the ordeal began. "I'm going to put my faith in God. I know he'll make a way for me somehow. I just have faith in him." "Why don't you go talk with the pastor?" Gwen asks. "He's pretty good with things like this." "I will." Arlene calls Pastor James Graves, a longtime friend of her family, and asks him for support. He arranges to meet with her in his office. Arlene explains her anxiety over the excessive bail and her fears for her son being sent to prison. He listens quietly and speaks compassionately. "Sister, you don't have to worry. Everything is going to be all right. The Lord promises us that where two or more are gathered together in his name, there he is in the midst. So be not troubled, because the Lord will see you through this." After hearing the pastor's word, Arlene felt a deep sense of relief from the pain and suffering. She thanked him. "And by the way, Sister Williams, I'll go to court with you." "That's so nice of you. Thank you so much." "You're welcome." A couple of weeks later, Attorney Bell has arranged for another bail reduction hearing. He filed the documents after the last court hearing. Mr. Bell, Pastor Graves, and Arlene arrive at court for the next hearing with a renewed faith and confidence that they would succeed this time. As they enter the courtroom, one of Mr. Bell's associates, Sandra, rushes over and exclaims, "Guess what? You won't believe this." "What?" Attorney Bell asks. "Judge G is ill and won't be in court today." "That's great," Bell says. "Well, Miss Williams, I guess you and the Reverend prayers were answered. Who's the new judge?" "It's been moved to Judge J's court," Sandra chuckles. "He's a brother." "Yeah," Attorney Bell interrupts. "He's also a fair man, so we will get a fair shake with him. He'll judge the case on his merits." "Thank you, Lord," thanked Arlene. "Thank you." "Thank both of you, too." As they took their seats in Judge J's courtroom, several minutes later, the bailiff called the court to order. Arlene's heart began to beat rapidly. She felt a deep anxiety as she awaits the judge's arrival. She almost faints when Judge J enters the courtroom. "It's Mr. J," she explains, "my son's high school teacher." "Are you sure?" Attorney Bell whispers. "Yeah, absolutely," she says. "I'll never forget what he did and tried to do to help Kenny." "Well, let's hope he's not upset with Kenny," Sandra says. Arlene sits quietly, wondering if Judge Day remembers Kenny. She feels a sense of relief knowing that God has answered her prayers. Now the courtroom seems more like a church to her than a courtroom. The district attorney is the same one that had been present at all the other bail hearings. Arlene had learned from courthouse gossip that he has a reputation of successfully prosecuting young black males. Many blacks believe he is a racist. A silence grips the courtroom as Judge J asks, "Are the attorneys ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Attorney Bell says. "Joseph Bell and Sandra Davis for the defendant." "Your Honor," DA Stevens says. "Andrew Stevens and Peggy Lipton for the people." "I have your written briefs," Judge J says. "Mr. Stevens, I'm still curious as to why the defendant's bail is set at $1 million for cocaine possession." "Because, Your Honor, there are other circumstances involved here," DA Stevens says, such as he has an unverifiable income to purchase expensive automobiles, jewelry, and designer clothes. He lives in an expensive penthouse on Lake Merritt, yet as far as we can determine, he has no viable job or income to purchase these items." "Do you have proof about the things you have mentioned in your brief?" Judge J asks. "I do." "What troubles me, Mr. Stevens, is that you are treating this case totally different than a case we had earlier today with similar charges." Judge J continues, "In that case earlier today, a young white female defendant was charged with the possession of 7 ounces of cocaine in her home. We set her bail at $50,000. Now you're asking me to give the defendant a bail for $1 million. I would like to remind the court that Judge Yee has sustained the bail on 3 separate hearings, D.A. Stevens says. Well, Mr. Stevens, Judge J says, I am not bound by the previous judge's rulings of Judge Yee. I operate in an atmosphere of fairness and equal justice in my courtroom. The young DA face turned red and flushed as he nervously says, Judge J, since Judge G was unable to appear in court due to illness, why don't you ask Judge Weinberg next door what he would do in a case such as this? Judge J pauses momentarily and looks around the courtroom as if to ask, do you all believe the words that came out of the DA's mouth? He turns back to face the young white DA with a slight smile. He says, you mean you want me to ask another judge what to do in my courtroom? It's just a suggestion, Judge, D.A. Stevens says. Don't insult my intelligence, Judge J replied with a smile. While Judge Weinberg and I don't even use the same hair products. You do know what I mean, don't you? The courtroom suddenly erupts with laughter, and Judge J restores order by hitting his gavel hard against the pad and shouting, order in the court, and suddenly the courtroom is quiet again. Thank you, Judge J says to the people in the courtroom. One day, I have to go before my Maker and be judged for my character and my deeds, and it's going to be said that I judged everybody fairly in my courtroom. Every soul is precious in God's eyes. Yes, Your Honor, D.A. Stevens says. Give me 5 figures for this young man's bail. You have 5 minutes to come up with it. The DA turned to his colleague, Miss Lipton, and motions for her to follow him outside the courtroom. After discussing the bail amount for several minutes, they agreed on an amount and walked hurriedly back into the courtroom. Judge J gestures for them to approach the bench. They walk slowly to the judge and whisper the amount to him. Judge J nods his head in agreement and says, bail is set at $50,000. It is ordered by this court. Arlene and her party are ecstatic. She can hardly believe what has just happened. She waves to Kenny and tells him she will post bail right away. As she turns to leave the courtroom, she hears Judge J ask, young man, did you attend East Oakland High about a decade or so ago? Yes, sir, Kenny says. Do you remember me? Yes, I remember you, Judge J says. Unfortunately, you haven't changed much since you were in high school. You're still a troublemaker and a disappointment to your mother, who seems to be a good Christian woman. I hope you take this opportunity to turn your life around. I'm going to try, Judge, Kenny says. No, you better do more than try, Judge J says. You're not out of the woods yet. You better take time to examine your lifestyle and make some immediate changes. Otherwise, you're going to spend some time in a penitentiary. Arlene smiles and says to herself, he was special as a teacher and a judge. The end. If you like this video, please like and subscribe and share. Thank you.